Upon hearing that her elderly grandfather had just passed away, Katie went straight to her grandparents' house to visit her 95-year-old grandmother and comfort her. When she asked how her grandfather had died, her grandmother replied, "He had a heart attack while we were making love on Sunday morning." Horrified, Katie told her grandmother that two people nearly 100 years old having sex would surely be asking for trouble. "Oh no, my dear," replied Granny. "Many years ago, realizing our advantage, we figured out the best time to do it was when the church bells would start to ring. It was just the right rhythm, nice and slow and even. Nothing too strenuous, simply in on the ding and out on the dong." She paused to wipe away a tear and continued, "He'd still be alive if the ice cream truck hadn't come along." Two guys are picked up by cops for drugs and are given the opportunity to walk only if they convince 10 other guys not to do drugs. They both agree and set off. The first male comes back and says, "I got the 10 guys, but it wasn't easy." The cop asks how he did it. "I drew a large circle and then a small circle and said, 'The large circle was your brain, and the small circle was your brain on drugs.'" The second male comes back and says, "I got 42 guys to quit drugs." The cop, impressed, asks, "How did he do it?" "Well, basically the same system as the first guy, but I drew the small circle first and said, 'You see, the small circle is your butthole before you go to jail, and the large circle is after you have been to jail.'" Steve left work one Friday afternoon. Being payday, instead of going home, he stayed out the entire weekend drinking with the boys and spent his entire paycheck. When he finally appeared at home, Sunday night, he was confronted by Colette and was barraged for nearly 2 hours with a tirade befitting his actions. Finally, Colette stopped the nagging and simply said to him, "How would you like it if you didn't see me for 2 or 3 days?" To which he replied, "That would be fine with me." Monday went by and he didn't see his wife. Tuesday and Wednesday came and went with the same results. Thursday, the swelling went down just enough where he could see her a little out of the corner of his left eye. A small Alabama wild animal park acquired a very rare species of gorilla. Within a few weeks, the gorilla, who was a female, became very difficult to handle. Upon examination, the park veterinarian determined the problem. The gorilla was in heat. To make matters worse, there was no male gorilla available. Reflecting on their problem, the park administrator thought of Steve, a redneck part-time intern who was responsible for cleaning the animals' cages. Steve, like most rednecks, had little sense, but possessed ample ability to satisfy a female of any species. The park administrator thought they might have a solution. Steve was approached with a proposition. Would he be willing to mate with the gorilla for $500? Steve showed some interest, but said he would have to think the matter over carefully. The following day, Steve announced that he would accept their offer, but only under the following 4 conditions. First, he said, "I don't want to have to kiss her on the lips." The park administrator quickly agreed to this condition. Second, Steve said, "You must never tell anyone about this." The park administrator again readily agreed to this condition. Third, Steve said, "I want all the offspring to be raised Southern Baptist." Once again, the administrator agreed. And last of all, Steve stated, "You've got to give me another week to come up with the $500. The CIA had an opening for an assassin. After all the background checks, interviews, and testing were done, there were 3 finalists, 2 men and a woman. For the final test, the CIA agents took one of the men to a large metal door and handed him a gun. "We must know that you will follow your instructions no matter what the circumstances. Inside this room, you will find your wife sitting in a chair. Kill her The man said, "You can't be serious. I could never shoot my wife." The agent said, "Then you're not the right man for this job. Take your wife and go home." The second man was given the same instructions. He took the gun and went into the room. All was quiet for about 5 minutes. Then the man came out with tears in his eyes. "I tried, but I can't kill my wife." The agent said, "You don't have what it takes. Take your wife and go home." Finally, it was the woman's turn. She was given the same instructions to kill her husband. She took the gun and went into the room. Shots were heard, one shot after another. They heard screaming, crashing, banging on the walls. After a few minutes, all was quiet. The door opened slowly, and there stood the woman. She wiped the sweat from her brow. "This gun is loaded with blanks," she said. "I had to beat him to death with the chair." 20 ways to let someone know their fly is open. The cucumber has left the salad. I can see the gun of Navarone. Someone tore down the wall, and your Pink Floyd is hanging out. You've got Windows on your laptop. Sailor Ned's trying to take a little shore leave. Your soldier ain't so unknown now. Quasimodo needs to go back in the tower and tend to his bells. You need to bring your tray table to the upright and locked position. Paging Mr. Johnson. Paging Mr. Johnson. Your pod bay door is open, Hal. Elvis Jr. has left the building. Minnie May is making a break for the escape pod. Ensign Haynes is reporting a hull breach on the lower deck, sir. The Buick is not all the way in the garage. Dr. Kimball has escaped. You've got your fly set for Monica instead of Hillary. Our next guest is someone who needs no introduction. You've got a security breach at Los Pantalones. I'm talking about Shaft. Can you dig it? I thought you were crazy. Now I can clearly see your nuts. A beautiful woman loved to garden, but couldn't seem to get her tomatoes to turn red. One day, while taking a stroll, she came upon a neighbor who had the most beautiful garden full of huge red tomatoes. The woman asked the gentleman, "What do you do to get your tomatoes red?" The gentleman responded, "Well, twice a day I stand in front of my tomato garden and expose myself, and my tomatoes turn red from blushing so much." The woman was so impressed, she decided to try doing the same thing to her tomato garden to see if it would work. So twice a day, for 2 weeks, she exposed herself to her garden, hoping for the best. One day the gentleman was passing by and asked the woman, "By the way, how did you make out? Did your tomatoes turn red?" "No," she replied, "but my cucumbers are enormous." My friends, if you want to watch other funny jokes, subscribe to the channel.